One of the most common stories for us humans to tell is the growth of our lives, particularly the change from being a child to being an adult. Everyone has their own trials, their own troubles, and their own ideas of what becoming an adult will be. No one story about growing up is the same, but it's something that's almost always shared because you can often relate to the main characters in question, either through your own experiences or that of family. Studio Ghibli and Miyazaki are no strangers to this kind of story. In fact, the one movie we've talked about from them on this channel covers these themes. But today we're going to be talking about another movie that they've done that has quite the different feel to Spirited Away. One that's a bit more subdued, an almost precautionary tale about rushing into adulthood and leaving behind the magic often found in being a child. Let's talk about Kiki's Delivery Service. Hello ladies and gentlemen, I am your ever-friendly Pokeprof, and welcome back to Fascinating Fiction. Released in 1989 in Japan, Kiki's Delivery Service is the fifth movie ever made in Studio Ghibli's long history, premiering after the 1-2 punch of My Neighbor Totoro and Grave of the Fireflies making the company well known. Originally known in Japan as Witch's Express Home Delivery, it's actually based off the book of the same name written by Aiko Kandono, which also makes me realize how many things I've reviewed recently that's been based off of books. Not doing it on purpose, mind you, but we've also got one more thing that I'm going to be talking about in the future that's based off of a book, so fair warning. The movie itself is a more down-to-earth style compared to the rest of the films before and a number after made by the company. All of Miyazaki's films before Kiki were well known for being heavy fantasy, with the only outlier being Takahata's Grave of the Fireflies. That movie, in and of itself, is an entire video on its own. But it's that aspect that really makes Kiki stand out, having a marriage of the odd and magical with the normal, a recurrent element in Miyazaki films, but one that is a great deal more understated than normal. We start off the film with the titular Kiki, a young witch who's recently had her 13th birthday. A custom among witches is that when they reach that age, they're to go out into the world to complete their training. What that training is never properly explained, but it's something that Kiki has been planning for a while now. All these plans are promptly tossed out the window the moment she hears just how perfect the full moon will be that night from the radio, deciding then that it's the night for her to start her journey. This catches everyone off guard, from her mother being thrown off enough to cause a potion she's making to explode, to her father's plans for the camping trip being cancelled, and even her cat Gigi trying to convince her otherwise, revealing that they were originally going to be playing it safe for another month. Kiki ignores everything in her excitement to get started. She barely gives her friends and family a day to get ready before they all see her off into the distance. Even in this opening sequence alone, we can already see the themes of the film by Kiki's actions. It doesn't matter that there were plans in place or expectations to be had, our little witch here is so eager to grow up, so sure that she'll take to it naturally. And while her parents eventually support her desire to leave that very night, her mother comments on the fact that Kiki can barely fly a broomstick, much less any of the other arts that witches might be able to do. Said lack of skill is immediately shown off by Kiki hitting several trees as she leaves home, a number of bells on them detailing just how often it is for her to run into them during flight. Flying through the air, Kiki asks Gigi to turn on the radio to listen to music as they fly, and this is about where I've got to mention probably the biggest thing about the movie that people aren't aware of: the fact that there are two distinct versions of Kiki's Delivery Service and the history behind it. You see, one of the early things to happen to a lot of Japanese anime is that it was often cut, edited, or changed in some way to make it easier for an American audience to understand or to better fit with the values at the time. Some of these changes could be very small, such as the name of a character, like how Sailor Moon's Usagi became Serena, to things that completely changed the meaning and identity of an entire piece of work, like the American Digimon movie being a Frank Frankenstein fusion of 3 different films. The original Ghibli film, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, was one of these Frankensteins, becoming known as the film Warriors of the Wind, that cut out huge sections of the original film, changed backstories and names, and overall altered the entire feel and message of the film as a whole. Ever since then, Miyazaki has adopted a strict no edits rule to anything under the Ghibli umbrella, to the point of even sending a prop katana to a director who wanted to edit down Princess Mononoke with one simple message: no cuts. So how does this relate to Kiki then? Well, when originally adapted into English, Disney had followed this rule pretty damn well, not removing anything from the film as per Miyazaki's wishes. But there was nothing to be said about adding anything in. As such, there was a lot of dialogue added into the movie by the cast, music in spots where there wasn't supposed to be any, and one of the biggest changes being completely original songs made for the original American dub of the film, replacing the original Japanese songs. It wasn't until Disney re-released the movie again on DVD in 2010 that all these changes got reverted, removing everything they added to make the movie more faithful to that original vision. I'm frankly of two minds on the matter here of what they did, but I'll talk about it a bit more once we've covered the film as a whole. I will, however, comment now that it makes the movie feel almost empty at points, considering my sisters watched the original Disney release so much that there are parts I know by heart, and it's weird to just have them be gone entirely. Also, just to mention, yes, I know of the streamlined dub of Kiki, but considering that was a Laserdisc exclusive that was originally intended for airlines, I'm just making sure you know I'm aware of it, and I'm moving on. After a bit of shenanigans, Kiki eventually ends up in a coastal city, deciding to make it her new home after she learns that there are no other witches there. She quickly sees that there are quite a number of differences between the little country town she's used to living in and the big city. Though, interestingly enough, there's apparently just enough magic in the world that most of the characters react to Kiki's flying with wonderment instead of being freaked out by a flying girl breaking the laws of physics. This is most noticeable with Tombo, a young boy who ends up becoming interested in Kiki and does his best to become friends with her throughout the film. This is where we see the other major theme of the film, of valuing the old ways of life versus embracing the new. While nowhere near as prevalent or as strong as a theme as the main one, it's noticeable with aspects like how Tombo talks about Kiki's dress and manners being old-fashioned, how some of the more mechanical aspects of the modern age are shown as failing, and how Kiki herself seems to get along with more of the older characters of the film than anyone her own age. We'll see this most later on. After not finding any friendly people outside of Tombo, and not finding a space to stay for the night, Kiki has a chance encounter with a pregnant owner of a bakery known as Asono, helping her out by delivering an item a customer had forgotten. It's after that Asono invites Kiki into her bakery, which doubles as a home, before offering Kiki a room, the pair of them eventually agreeing that Kiki will help out at the store, while also using her ability to fly to make a delivery service. Eventually, Kiki gets her first delivery after a few days, complete with music that wouldn't be out of place in an old Final Fantasy game. Seriously, take a listen. Kiki botches the delivery, which is to give a kid a small stuffed cat toy, and has to use Gigi as a replacement while she searches for the lost toy. This is where she meets Ursula. Well, in the original dub, she's named. She's actually nameless in the Japanese version of the story, and I think the current available version to audiences now in English? For some reason, my brain thinks she did get named, but I can't find any evidence of it. Regardless, she patches up the toy, which got damaged when Kiki lost it. This is where the major plot element of the themes of growing up really start coming in for Kiki, as after getting sick from her delivery from the kindly old lady known only as Madame, Kiki finds herself losing her powers and both being unable to fly or understand Gigi. For a girl whose whole identity is being a witch, having her magic and being able to use it, the sudden loss of that is hard for the girl. But it's not entirely unexpected either, as we've seen just before her getting sick that she isn't enjoying the everyday life of an adult like she thought she would. Ursula comes back into the picture about this point, visiting Kiki and even encouraging her to come out and spend some time at her cabin. It's here that the themes of the film properly get explored, as Ursula details that how, despite her own love and passion for painting, she too eventually found herself unable to do it properly. It was a block, something that she couldn't work past immediately. Her suggestion to Kiki is that time away from a skill is sometimes needed, letting someone refresh themselves or find inspiration to help renew their drive. I've got a feeling that this is something that we're all too familiar with these days, especially for those of us in the content creator space, the feeling of burnout. The idea that you must do something and it exhausts you, even if it's something that you love or hold dear. Hell, part of the reason I've taken so long with this video is in part because of the exhaustion of life, of doing the duties I need to do and it leaving me the lack of desire to do much else. It's a very real aspect that a lot of people face in their lives, and while Ursula's suggestion that it will just come back to you if you let yourself rest enough isn't a bad one, it does feel like sometimes that's not always the answer. The final bit of the movie involves Tombo trying to help hold a blimp to the ground, as his major elements for his interest in Kiki as well as his actual character quirk is his love of flying. The wind catches him though, and it's up to Kiki to force past her issues, grabbing a nearby broom from a street sweep and taking off to save her friend. What's an interesting element to note here for the scene is that Kiki's skill in flying hasn't improved, showing us her struggling the entire time to try and save Tombo, which she does. While the entire event of the blimp and Tombo's rescue could feel a little out of place, a sudden heightening of the stakes to make it more interesting for the third act, this actually still goes with those themes of adulthood. While yes, Ursula is right that sometimes that you do need to take time away, a clear head and a recharged body to reignite that spark for a person's talent, this isn't always the case. At times, you've got to force yourself through your muddled feelings, your depression, or your lack of drive to get the job done. It's part of what it means to grow up, to sometimes accept that we're going to need to do our jobs even if we don't want to do them or feel incapable of doing them. Kiki shows this by pushing past her own block to be able to fly again. It's these themes of growing up that are a steady constant over the film's running time, and it's quite the distinction from the ones that we see in Spirited Away. Whereas in that film, it's all about young Chihiro maturing, learning to become a better person, and standing on her own 2 feet, this movie is more of a cautionary tale. Kiki, in her eagerness to prove herself, to be the adult she thinks she is, rushes into situations without any thought. It's also why Kiki often compares herself to a lot of the other women in the movie, often complaining about how dull and drab she looks, and not believing herself pretty. She still sees herself as a child still, and the old-fashioned nature of her country life before she goes out on her journey only exasperates that. We even see this in the songs that are used to bookend the movie. In the Japanese and the re-release, the original song is a bouncy Beach Boys-esque tune to show off Kiki's eagerness and innocence, even if what I've told about the context of that song isn't like that at all. This compares, however, to the much more controlled and elegant ending song, emphasizing Kiki's growth. And out of all the things that the original Disney cut of the film changed, they actually stuck to the themes of the movie with the songs that they added in. Sung by Sydney Forrest, the song Soaring has that same bouncy energy, along with its lyrics further giving the theme of Kiki wanting to be an adult. This plays counterbalance with I'm Going to Fly, which serves as a more mature, calming song compared to Soaring. And while the lyrics aren't as focused on that state of growth, it's clear that the singer here is more mature in attitude compared to Soaring. Which brings us to some of the other edits and changes made to the film with the original Disney release. I said before that I'm of two minds when it comes to how the dubbing and the changes were made, but before we get into that, I will state right now that I have seen enough discourse online about dubbing in Japanese anime to know what kind of powder keg I'm probably sitting on even talking about this. I warn anyone who is going to be discussing about this in my comments to please do so respectfully. I do read every single comment and I try to respond to most of them. But if there is one thing that I've come to understand, both as a writer myself and as a consumer of media, that translating is one of the hardest things to do because of the cultural divide. Talking in terms of the Japanese language alone, there are entire words, phrases, and concepts that have no English equivalent. One of those aspects would be the concept of ma, which is described as a pause in time. We see this concept being used in the re-release and Japanese cuts of the film, where entire moments of silence are given to allow the movie to simply exist as it is. That element, when removed, goes against the spirit of the film. And this goes doubly so when it's full of joking dialogues designed specifically to take up that space. But there is one moment of the original dub of the film that hurts more than anything else, and that's actually the ending of Gigi, as it has him speaking to Kiki once more and her understanding him. The original cut and re-release instead have Gigi just becoming a normal cat, because that's supposed to be a mark of Kiki's maturity, of her putting away childlike things like having an imaginary friend that you talk to. It's dubbing like these that ignore the spirit and change the intent that are the ones that I'm usually fine in getting rid of, but I also know that it's not as cut and dry as that. I know there are some things that are simply not going to work as a one-to-one between languages, and I've seen enough direct translations from Japanese, Spanish, and German to know that just slapping it into the script as is isn't going to work. There needs to be changes for it to fit the respective audience and for it to flow naturally. Which is why I feel like, despite not being the original songs, Soaring and I'm Gonna Fly actually should have remained as the songs for the English dub, even with its re-release. While I do appreciate and even want access to the original songs from the Japanese version of the film, the Sydney Forest songs only enhance the themes of growth and maturity, something that is not as clear to an English-speaking audience with the Japanese songs. If nothing else though, it makes me glad that the songs exist regardless of their actual use within the movie itself. Out of the Ghibli films, Kiki's Delivery Service is perhaps the film that really showed what the studio could do, even when it came to the simplest of stories. They took the spark from the original book of a young witch and her delivery service and breathed life into it. While not the most adventurous of films, the themes of growth, of the eagerness of maturity coming face to face with the realities of what growing up really means, made the movie engaging. It's also rare for a movie, especially as old as this one, to be tackling the idea of burnout, of what it means to lose one's drive. It's something that a lot of people in my generation and those after me are feeling more and more every day, where it feels like nothing we do ever matters in the end. And while there's no grand resolution, no standing shout of "we do matter," the film offers the solace that even the littlest of actions can impact others' lives. Be it through letting yourself rest or pushing through the grind, Kiki shows us that we can find a little witch in all of us to make sure we deliver our best.
So I'm gonna fly.
With all that said, I hope I've done a good job to entertain you, and I'll do my best to do so again in the future. Hopefully you'll follow along with my content by subscribing and doing all the other things that gives us YouTubers life. If you wish to support me a bit more, I do have a Patreon where you can get access to bonus content. But until next time, stay frosty.